Howdy folks, it's your friend Fishing with Dom, and today I'm going to talk to you about fishing jerkbaits for bass. Let's check it out. Alright, now I don't mean to sound cocky, like I'm a know-it-all young hotshot or anything like this, but I'm pretty dang good at fishing with the jerkbait. Several years ago, when Randy Howell won the Bassmaster Classic, a lot of it was due to fishing the jerkbait. I imitated how he was fishing it. I looked at different points to what he was doing, and I went out and I did that for myself, and I took several different factors into consideration, and I've been taking notes because jerkbaits are the sole reason why I began to catch more bass than a lot of other anglers throughout Michigan or wherever they can legally bass fish once the ice is off the lake. By the time other people get the chance to, get a hold of some larger smallmouth bass, I've already got several dozen under my belt just because I can fish with the jerkbait and I know how to. Now, politics aside on whether or not you're allowed to or not, I'm going to talk about it. Now, these are tips you can use in the early spring. These are tips you can use in the summertime. But I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to share with you a whole lot of goodies I know about this topic of fishing. First things first, there are two different jerkbaits I like to use a lot of the time. And those are they're nothing too crazy fancy, but they've caught a lot of bass for me. They are the Rapala Husky Jerk and the Berkley Skinny Cutter 110. Now this Berkley Skinny Cutter, it is 4 1/4 inches long. It weighs 7/16, almost half of an ounce. Generally speaking, it goes for $8. And then when you're casting and retrieving it, you're expecting to fish this bait somewhere around the 8-foot marker or so. Now, with that being said, the Rapala Husky Jerks are very similar as well. This is the smaller of the two sizes I like to fish with throughout the year. Doesn't matter if there's still ice floating on the lake or if it's November and the winds are just blowing out there. I'm going to try to jerk whatever it can take out there. But this smaller size I use with the Rapala Husky Jerk, this is the size 12. This is the second largest size. It's 4 3/4 inches long, just a ½ inch longer than that Skinny Cutter. Dives down anywhere between 4 and 8 foot of water or so, and it suspends. It's a cool thing about both of these baits. I don't know if I mentioned it with this cutter. It suspends. Both of them. This Husky Jerk weighs the same as the cutter, coming in at 7/16 of an ounce. It has 3 number 6 treble hooks on them. These nice wide bend VMC hooks. So when you're fishing it, you've got a whole lot of punch room for that bass to come through and just pick it up, and you give them the beans. Just absolutely sock it to them. The larger size, and probably the size I fish the most, and the jerkbait I fish the most, would be this larger Rapala Husky Jerk. This is the size 14. It's 5 1/2 inches long. And I'm going to tell you, this is a big boy. Especially when I fish this is a big bait to be using. Now, it dives down to the same depth as the Skinny Cutter and the size 12 Husky Jerk. You're looking at a 4 foot to 8 foot range or so. And there's a lot of variability behind jerkbait fishing, and I'll explain that later. It weighs 5/8 of an ounce, and it has larger treble hooks on there. These are number 4s. So for the guys out there who like to walleye troll, who like to fish for predator fish like pike or muskie, it's solid bait for you. You got big hooks, but we're talking about bass today. The bass still get a piece of this, and you're going to have a large hook, and they're not going to go anywhere. You're going to absolutely sock it to them. Now, I have to tell you that this Skinny Cutter is new. I've fished with them before in the past, but I haven't fished with this exact model. I've actually lost several of these, because that leads me to one of my first tips. Look for structure that these fish are going to be hanging out in. Doesn't matter what time of the year, but especially when I'm fishing the jerkbait, it's going to be April, it's going to be early May, and in a lot of instances, it's going to be the middle of March. It's the middle of March right now here in southeast Michigan, and I haven't thrown a jerkbait yet because there is still about 6 inches of unsafe ice on my lake right now. Whenever I'm home on spring break, I like to walk the shoreline. I like to look for the warmest water, and I like to look for timber. Those are areas of cover that are going to produce, how would I word this? Small life forms such as plankton and zooplankton and phytoplankton for bait fish to feed on. Those are the areas that are going to light up first with bait fish, because you're going to be looking for structure in the shallow water, the stuff that warms up quickly. When the ice is on its way out, I like to drive around to some of my local different fishing spots and look for areas that are opening up first or at a more rapid rate than others. That's going to tell me something about the contour of the bottom. When a lake melts off in the springtime, generally speaking, the shallower areas that melt off quicker, they have a softer bottom, meaning that they'll retain heat a little bit better. And if I can walk through and see timber, that's going to be a spot I'm going to mark and I'm going to check out. And throughout the year, I'm going to be going through these spots with a canoe and identifying if I can see anything on the bottom, because I'm looking for shallower spots most of the time. Canal inlets, back lagoons, basins off of the main lake that might be a little shallower, that yields some timber. And I'm going to be throwing these baits at them. If you look at this model right here, let me flip it over. It's just sandpapered to all hell. I've caught so many bass with this bait right here, the size 12 Tennessee Shad Husky Jerk. And then this big old gold size 14. She's got some scratches on the war paint because I put these things to the test and they run through the absolute ringer. How the heck I still have them, I don't know, because I'm throwing these around wood and I'm making contact with the wood. And when I'm fishing around structure like this, if I make contact, I'm going to pull it up, my rod tip that is, and let that bait sit there, sometimes painfully long. I'll be real with you. I'll count to 20 or even 30 sometimes before I give that bait another twitch of the rod. And all jerk baits you're going to fish with. It doesn't matter if it's a Strike King, a live target series, this Berkeley or this Rapala. All jerk baits fish differently. So play with that when you're in jerk bait country. This cutter dives forward when you give it a jerk. This Rapala Husky Jerk, when you give it a pull of the rod, it scoots forward, gives a little tail action. And I'll do that. I will make a long cast with my rod setup. I will crank it down to depth, and immediately, I'm not even going to be reeling. I'm going to make that cast, bring it down to depth, and I'm just going to hold it there and pause it. Count to 30 or so. Twitch my rod tip. A little down when I'm standing up on my boat or from shore. Give it the downward rod tip so that bait gets a little downward or sideways darting action depending on the bill. If I pull it up, it's going to pull the bait up, and sometimes, depending on the style of the bait, it could get hung up in timber. Now, there's a difference in a lot of baits, in a lot of debate. Should I get a jerk bait that suspends, or should I get one that slowly sinks or slowly rises? Well, truth be told, they're all more or less the same thing, in my opinion, and I've read that years ago in North American Fishing Club magazine. I've seen it on Bassmaster forums. But there are different things we can do as anglers to control the level of suspense that the bait provides. I'm fishing a fluorocarbon. Reason behind that, the fluorocarbon is dense. It's going to let my bait sink a little bit deeper than a monofilament would or a braid would. Now these Husky Jerks, they suspend very well. I don't need to put any suspending strips or any weight tape on them for them to keep a neutral buoyancy. These baits do a pretty good job on their own. But with the fluorocarbon, it's very sensitive. Those fish are going to come and they're going to barely peck. And my line's not going to be all too tight to that bait. But I'm going to still make contact with it, of course. Don't have a crazy amount of slack in there. Just keep attention to it. You don't need to constantly have your line taut between the eyelet of your bait and your rod tip. That bass is going to come through and he's just going to almost drop his upper and lower jaw on it, and you're going to give him the beans. Like, as little slack as you can get away with, but give him a little wiggle room, and then when he touches it, you set that hook and you crank into him. And it's still cold out. The bass isn't going to fight that much, but you're gonna bring them in. And I've caught a lot of bass doing this. It was in the spring of 2011. I was throwing a clown size 12 Rapala Husky jerk. My first 2 casts for the year, I caught 2 largemouth bass. Back then, I thought that was really, really cool. Now, it sounds like bad luck to me, but by all means, it was a really, really cool day. First 2 casts of the year, 2 largemouth bass. Hey, I was happy with that. Like, who else wouldn't be? Now, you can use spinning outfits if you'd like. I like using bait casting outfits. I can get real good long casts with them. Really good long controlled casts. And I think the bait caster fishes the jerk baits a little bit better, especially when they're almost half ounce. Or this size 14 is a little bit bigger than a half ounce. Whatever you want to use. A spinning reel or a bait casting reel. Fluorocarbon. That's what I really, really, really recommend. And with the fluorocarbon, very sensitive. It's like stealth level 7. The fish aren't going to be seeing it because I'm fishing in clear water a lot of these times. I'm letting that bait pause for 20, sometimes 30 seconds before I twitch it back. I can't express this enough. It is painful to fish that slow sometimes. But then again, I catch a lot more bass than a lot of people do this time of year than just because I use jerkbaits. I don't know where I was going with that, but just because I use jerkbaits. Fluorocarbon, sensitive. You can use the braid, but the fluorocarbon is also abrasion resistant because I'm fishing around a lot of rocks, rocks in the sandy structure. That'll a lot of the times absorb heat from the sunlight that protrudes in, change the water temperature just a little bit. If the water temperature changes microscopically, that allows the teeniest organisms in the lake to come to life, to bring in the small bait fish that feed off of these phyto and zooplanktons, and that'll bring in shad or bluegills that'll eat those small minnows or plankton, and then big old mama bass will come through. See this jerkbait just dibbing along, and her metabolism is going to be slower than a turtle climbing the Great Wall of China. Give them a nice amount of time to look at the bait and to even feel the bait, because when you jerk it, a lot of jerk baits, they have an internal rattle system. So that's going to appeal to this another sense that the fish is relying on in order to catch their next meal. So there's a rattle that'll bring them in. They're going to see that bait and let it sit there. And that bass is just going to come up, look at it, and I don't know if they look at it and wait for it to move again before they strike, but a lot of the times, I'd say 9 out of 10 of the bass I catch on a jerkbait, it's not on the move. It's after it's been sitting for about at least halfway through what I'm counting to. So if I'm counting to 30 seconds, around the 15-second marker, so halfway through, like 20 seconds I'm waiting, around 10 or so they hit it. So this isn't a lazy way of fishing. This is a slow way of fishing, but you have to pay very, very close attention when you are fishing jerkbaits, because that bite is going to happen, and it's going to happen quick. But if you're ready, you have a solid rod, you have a sensitive line, you've got a bait with sharp hooks. Very, very important, because sometimes they might just nip at the back end of it. You're going to sock it to them and put them in the boat, land yourself. A lot of the times, the largest bass of the fishing season. Let that bait sit there. It'll allow that fish to come through, see it, and appeal to their metabolism rate. Oh, it looks good. It sounds good. You know, it feels good to them. It feels natural with that rattle and the disturbance that the bait has in the water column. And it's not moving, so, boop. I'm going to take a swipe at it. That bass is going to take a swipe at it. I've caught a lot of big bass doing this over the years. But for the rod you're using, it's debatable. I like, because I'm throwing larger jerk baits a lot of the time, such as the size 12 and 14 and this 110 cutter. They're weighing around the half-ounce marker or so. The 14's a little bit bigger, but a lot of people recommend using a medium power, extra fast action. But I like to use a medium heavy power, faster extra fast action as well. With the jerkbait, that fast action tip, that's going to allow you to move that bait very quickly and erratically without chugging the rod completely. And with the medium heavy power, I'm able to lift that fish out of cover and just sock it to him. A medium, if I'm fishing out in the open and around sparse weeds and rocks and whatnot, that would do just fine. But I would primarily focus my efforts on what rod I'm using between a medium and medium heavy power, all depending on the size of my jerkbait. Once you're around that half-ounce size or so, especially with the action and how you're fishing these baits, I'm using a medium heavy fast or extra fast. To be honest with you, this is the rod I'm using for my spinner baits a lot of the time too. But with all of this being said, I know I've said a mouthful. I like to fish larger jerkbaits. I like to fish a variety of different colors, but try to stay with the natural colors. Make sure your hooks are sharp. Make sure you're looking for structure. If I haven't said that already, I can't remember these 2 points. But go out there and have fun. That's the 5th biggest point. You can have all the right tools, you can have all this, but if you're out there enjoying a nice spring day, generally speaking, fishing slow and fishing shallow, you're going to pop yourself a big old bucket mouth, or smallmouth for that matter. Can we call smallmouth bucket mouths? I think so. I'm not 100% sure. To be honest and to be real with you, most of my springtime smallmouth aren't caught on the jerkbait. This is primarily for the largies that are out there cruising, looking for food, preparing themselves for the spawn. You could even call this my favorite pre-spawn bass fishing method. But until next time, and before I sign off actually, let me know in the comment section below if you're a jerkbait fisherman. If not, you need to try it. Was there a jerkbait you think I should try, or is there something I should have mentioned? Let me know in the comment section below. I would really appreciate that. And also, if you have video content ideas, I'd love to hear from you. But until next time, I'm Fishing with Dom. I hope you have a fantastic day. Go get you some jerkbaits. Bye-bye.